Thank you again for joining us for this timely conference. I'm very excited for this upcoming panel, so I'll just jump right into introducing our speakers. Our security panel, Deterring and Defending in a Regional Conflict, is moderated by Korea Society Board Vice Chair, General Retired Walter Sharp, and features former Vice Minister of National Defense and Senior Research Fellow at the Sejong Institute, Dr. Shin Bum-chol, Director of the Indo-Pacific Security Initiative of the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, Marcus Garlauskas, former Commander of U.S. Forces Korea Combined Forces Command and United Nations Command, General Retired Paul LaCamera, and Vice President of Center for Asia-Pacific Strategy and former Army Special Forces Colonel David Maxwell. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our distinguished panel. General Sharp, over to you.
Great. Thank you, and thanks to the Korea Society and the Atlantic Council for putting on this conference today and the great panelists that I have here. So this panel is about deterring and defending in a regional conflict. Let me just tee it up, and then I'll ask our panelists for different perspectives. Today, we are no longer in a great power competition from a military perspective. We've gone beyond North Korea against South Korea, Russia or China against Japan. We are now, I believe, in what I call the great alliance or great partnership competition. North Korea, China, Japan, North Korea, China, and Russia versus Japan, United States, and South Korea, at least in the Northeast Asia realm. And we need to think about it from that context, and that's what this panel is really all about. From a military perspective, we all know what's in North Korea from a military capabilities, but we can't forget in Russia's Eastern District and China's Northern Theater, hundreds of thousands of troops, thousands of tanks and artillery systems, hundreds of jet airplanes, and hundreds of ships and submarines, and both being nuclear capable. And when you look just beyond the military side of it, but the alliance and the agreement, the China-North Korea Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance from 1961, which is still in effect, the increased trade between China and North Korea, especially getting around sanctions. And then from the developing Russia-North Korea relationships that was codified in June of 2024 with a strategic partnership treaty that includes mutual military assistance clauses, elevating the relationship much beyond just a symbolic diplomacy. It enables joint military planning, technology transfers, and troop deployments. The 15,000 North Korean troops that went to Ukraine and the millions of rounds of artillery, and with missile technology coming from Russia into North Korea, it's very evident that North Korea, China, and Russia are working together from a security and military perspective. And we are starting to recognize that, and I think that's what this panel is going to talk a lot about. I mean, even recently, very recently, in the House of Representatives, there's a bill that's been introduced entitled the Defending International Security by Restricting Unlawful Partnerships, or the Disrupt Bill. And it is specifically aimed at China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran competition. And it requires a plan to be put together to be able to deal with that type of adversarial competition or adversarial collaboration. And what's also unique about it is that if it's passed, the legislation will require secretaries of state, defense, commerce, and treasury working with the national intelligence and the CIA to put together a plan to be able to help counter these collaboration of our enemies. So with that as a background, we've got a great panel assembled here. I'm going to ask Dr. Shin to start to talk about how can we deter and, if necessary, defend in a regional conflict from a Korea perspective. Then Marcus will talk about how his thoughts on a U.S. perspective. Paul will dive into beyond just military, but an all-of-government approach. And then David's going to talk about how do you do that from a command and control perspective? How do you think regionally from a command and control perspective? That promise they're all going to stay to 5 to 7 minutes, so there'll be time for questions, but a lot to unpack here. And Dr. Shin, let me start with you, sir.
Thank you, General. I also thank you, Korea Society and Atlantic Council and Kim Koo Foundation for having me this wonderful event. Since General Sharp laid out the geopolitical military situation in the region, I will directly to the issues. We have to think about the deter and limit the cooperation between North and China, North and Russia, and potential trilateral military cooperation among North and China and Russia. That's our mission. To do that, I think we have to develop our modernization of the alliance. That's for sure. Interestingly and fortunately, last night we see the two documents. One is the joint fact sheet of the summit. The other is the joint statement of the SCM, Defense Ministerial Meetings. Instead of speaking my own view, I think I will explain those part, the deterring the regional threat of those two documents. I think the first one is the U.S. expand its cooperation on the regional context. The two documents explicitly reaffirm those kind of cooperation on the text. I will say that, quote, the ROC and United States will enhance U.S. conventional deterrence posture against all regional threat to the alliance. All regional threat to the alliance, including North Korea. No, in addition, it described that the two sides, United States and Korea, reaffirm the relevant understanding since 2006. This means that the alliance worked together with the regional issue, although the two parties did not use the term strategic flexibility, but it explained this meaning by emphasizing the understanding since 2006, which is understanding between the two ministers, Ban Ki-moon, the foreign minister at the time, and Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State of the United States at the time. The content, the understanding was that we understand the U.S. strategic flexibility, but the strategic flexibility of the USFK cannot be involved in the regional conflict without the support or against the will of Korean people. That's the understanding at the time, but we advanced the term to deter regional threat in this regard. I think that although we do not emphasize the term of strategic flexibility, I think the two countries work more on the regional issue. Because the joint fact sheet also emphasized maritime cooperation, which is, as we know, that the freedom of navigation and respect of the international law of the sea and the peace and stability on the Taiwan Strait, it includes. With regard to that, I think this is the strongest wording I ever seen at the summit. That's a very important one. On the other hand, although it is not that emphasized during the defense ministerial meeting or the joint chief of meeting, we called it MCM at the time, it emphasized the South Korea's active role against to deter the threat from the North. That is kind of a division of labor, I think. The South Korea plays a more role to deter North Korea in the regional context, and then United States be more flexible, not only to deter North Korea, but also deter the threat in the region. That's kind of a division of labor. With regard to the second point, I think that we have to modernize our alliance. Those two documents describe the many aspects of the modernization of the alliance. I think I can describe three categories. One is modernization of Korean military. The other is modernization of USFK. The third is modernization of command and control system of the alliance. Let me explain reverse way. The first one is the modernization of command and control system of the alliance. That is explicitly explained in the name of transition, I believe. So the Joint Facts Sheet explicitly mentioned to accelerate the OPCON transition, and then SCM document say that we are going to have a FOC in 2016. Maybe if it is successfully finished, there will be a FOMC in 2017, and it opened the door to OPCON transition within the term of President Trump and President Lee Jae-myung. That's for sure. South Korea invest more money to C4ISR, I think. Then there will be a stable OPCON transition. Second one is modernization of USFK. I think that to respond to all regional threats, U.S. forces posture might be more flexible, which means currently U.S. force structure, USFK's force structure in the region is army-centered. Probably there will be a transition, more multi-domain operational capable USFK. That is a modernization of USFK in the future. So I think there will be a support from Korean side. That's the reason why I can see the text of 33 billion US dollar support to USFK. I don't know in details, but I think that in that way, the RAG-US alliance work together. Last one is modernization of Korean military. As we know, that South Korea spend 3.5 GDP in near future. It is a drastic increase of defense budget. We also purchased 25 US billion dollar to purchase a US weapon system to strengthen South Korea's military. But more importantly, quite a surprise, the two leaders agreed the construction of nuclear-powered strike submarine, SSN. Although there is no detail, but I think this is very important development since the nuclear-powered submarine itself is not, the area of operation is not the Korean Peninsula, but also capable to operate in the region. So although we do not emphasize because of our diplomatic prudency, not to provoke China, but the capability means a lot. I started my career in 1995. This year marked 30 years of my professional career. At the time, beginning of my career in 1995, we cannot even think about this kind of cooperation between the two. On the other hand, we cannot look down on the amount of money South Korea invests into the United States, because we do not see the hard, tangible result with regard to nuclear submarine cooperation. Then there will be a huge disappointment from Korean side. So I think the U.S. side should be cooperative on this issue. I'm begging you, frankly speaking. If we fail to make forward this, I think that there will be a huge backlash. That's my concern. So we have to develop this issue to make our alliance indeed ironclad alliance and be more sustainable. One last thing, I'm sorry, I'm out of time, but one last thing is a very important one, because some may have a misunderstanding of the nuclear potential of Korea. Because of our intention to revise the 1-2-3 agreement, probably have the capability of uranium management, capability of reprocessing. That is not relating to nuclear potential. It is purely relating to economic issue. So that's the reason why our security advisor, Wee Sung-na, last night, emphasized it's not relating to the nuclear potential. Some Korean scholars misunderstood, if we have, it's very good to have that kind of capability, it's a potential nuclear development. That's not the truth. The Lee Jae-myung administration does not have intention to hold and develop nuclear weapon. That's for sure. This is the, I will stop here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Marcus.
So, since I was on General Sharp's staff, I'm going to follow his guidance, and I got my clock going to make sure I stay on time. So thanks for this opportunity, and it's really fitting, General Sharp, that you're the one chairing this panel. So as I think many of you know, and of course you know, General, this has been a focus of mine going back to the days when I was your chief of intel estimates and then your chief strategist. And I even see another strategist from that team out in the audience, Fred Vellucci, who worked on this problem. And so I want to emphasize that although you build it as a U.S. view, and I'm clearly an American, this is a personal view, and it maybe is informed by having looked at this a little closer than most. So this challenge has gotten only more severe and more publicly prominent over time. And at IPSI, we've been conducting studies, workshops, and tabletop exercises exploring the risk of this sort of simultaneity. And what we found is that if a conflict with one adversary in East Asia doesn't end quickly, you can expect it to widen. And the potential for expansion to simultaneous conflicts with both the PRC and North Korea, and potentially with support and support from Russian involvement, is going to pose a high risk to U.S. and allied defense objectives, particularly because there's some complex operational and strategic challenges. We found a lot of plausible pathways where a conflict with one of these adversaries could expand to multiple adversaries, even without collusion between Beijing, Pyongyang, and Moscow. As a matter of fact, we found some interesting scenarios where it was the lack of communication that actually led to simultaneity. So it's ill-advised. As a former intelligence officer, I'll say that to try and confidently predict, how adversaries are going to behave in a conflict. But the pathways are sufficiently numerous and sufficiently plausible that if a conflict with North Korea or with China in particular doesn't conclude quickly, we should anticipate that simultaneous conflicts with both could result. And so if this is a problem, what do we do about it? So first, though, we should be prepared for the possibility for such simultaneity and for nuclear escalation, by the way, in the context of such simultaneity. We've got options. We shouldn't give up on the possibility of deterring the simultaneity. So, for example, if a conflict breaks out in the Taiwan Strait or on the Korean Peninsula, we have options to manage the escalation and to try and prevent an all-out regional war. So our work has found that even if we fail to deter aggression by either of those two primary adversaries, there'll still be key opportunities for integrated deterrence to help approach to manage the risk of escalation with both. And our work's identified a series of leverage points in Beijing and Pyongyang in particular that would help to prevent such horizontal and vertical escalation. But to prepare better, we have to overcome some very strong biases in the U.S. and in allied institutions that are impeding both our understanding of this problem and our ability to prepare for it. We have these deep-seated organizational and cognitive biases, and I want to actually emphasize that Jonathan Corrado has been doing some work on this and some writing, and I really encourage you to read his work, and really of understanding and how to combat these biases. And so we need as an alliance, individually but also together, to develop new assessments of the likelihood and the potential indicators of simultaneous conflicts with the PRC and North Korea, as well as limited nuclear attack by either. These should use structured analytic techniques to identify and overcome biases. But also, our alliance defense leadership should publicly and privately underscore that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could lead to a broader regional conflict, even if Beijing, Seoul, and Washington seek to avoid one, as a means to foster allied preparedness and reinforce deterrence. We should reconceptualize planning as thinking about aggression by either the PRC or North Korea marking the start of an Indo-Pacific campaign that will require us to deter and potentially defeat other possible adversaries. We should also shift our focus, as I think we're seeing based on the comments that came out of the MCM Military Committee and out of the summit, that we should think about deterrence of aggression against South Korea from all adversaries and not just from North Korea. And we should establish guidelines and guidance that the risks of simultaneous conflicts have such key implications that planning and exercises should address these possibilities. And we're not going to be able to discuss the details of sensitive plans or exercises in public, but it should be widely understood that this is something that is a fundamental, foundational element of our planning, our thinking, our preparation, and our training. And so we should be establishing working groups. You know, we've done this with the Nuclear Consultative Group. We address this very sensitive nuclear issue, but yet we don't have that same sort of public messaging that, hey, we're considering other possibilities. And we don't have to name China. You know, I think Dr. Shin is right. You know, we can tiptoe a little bit about the political sensitivities, but at the end of the day, we have to address the fact that this is not something that we can entirely avoid speaking about. Another element is we should undertake a comprehensive reassessment of command and control, and of course we're going to hear more about that, I know, from General LaCamera and from Dave. But let's be honest here. This is a sensitive issue, as Dr. Shin mentioned, and those views in Seoul and Washington on China have grown more aligned in recent years. The alliance's role in a potential U.S. PRC military confrontation, it's a difficult question. Many South Koreans worry about being entrapped in such a confrontation, while other Americans actually wonder why they should commit to risking a nuclear war against North Korea if the ROK is not clearly committed to defending the United States in the event of a war with China. I think both of those concerns are frankly a bit overblown, but they're very real concerns. And so as a result, we really need to work more closely together to reassure and coordinate the parameters for the alliance in the event of a PRC-U.S. conflict. So I'm seeing progress here, and we've talked about it a little bit already today. The presidents of the United States and South Korea have repeatedly emphasized the importance of preserving peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. They've encouraged the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues and opposed unilateral changes to the status quo. They've noted that the U.S. and the ROK will enhance U.S. conventional deterrence posture against all regional threats to the alliance, including the DPRK. As the chairman of our Joint Chiefs, General Jin and General Kane, noted in their formal statement coming out of the Military Committee, combined deterrence extends beyond the Korean Peninsula and contributes to regional deterrence in support of security, freedom, and prosperity. This regional view has to be our basis of our thinking going forward. I'd prefer not to fight China, North Korea, and Russia simultaneously. But to deter these three, we must be clearly ready to fight all of them simultaneously. Readiness isn't just an operational matter for military commanders like the ones we see here. It's a strategic matter for politicians, for thought leaders, even outside of government. We have to be strategically ready, politically ready, not just militarily ready, to meet this challenge as an alliance, to deter, and if necessary, to defeat these threats. If we show a fear to even discuss these possibilities because of their sensitivities, this will undermine deterrence. We should not show fear to our potential adversaries. Fear undermines deterrence. Thank you.
Paul.
You want to hit that for me too? Thanks. So thank you, sir.
I was 30 seconds over. Sorry, sir.
Thanks to the Atlantic Council for this opportunity. I'm going to attempt to tie things together from the previous panels and maybe some history that comes after us here, and then what I've heard here. To quote Ike, I have a challenge. I know this about myself. If I can't define the problem, I expand it. The ambassador quoted Clausewitz, so thank you very much. I don't have to do that. War is an extension of politics, and really that's kind of what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Economic security is national security. Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. It's all interconnected, and I was always taught that the business of America is business. But we're in an inflection point in history. National Security Act of 1947, right, coming after World War II, got us through the Korean War, the Armistice, the Vietnam War, Dom Rep, Eagle Claw, and Grenada. And then what came after that, roughly 40 years later, was what came out of Eagle Claw and Grenada was the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986. We're roughly 40 years later, okay, we're at another inflection point in history. The Soviet Union has fallen, okay. It's no longer a bipolar world, it's a multipolar world, multi-domain. We didn't have to deal with, so there's two spaces that are contested right now, outer space and cyberspace. That's something that we have to deal with. And so this law that that may come along is in my mind, suboptimal. The next fight, what we've learned over the last 20 plus years of fighting is the fight's going to be joint, it's going to be combined, it's going to be interagency, and it's going to be multi-domain. The geographic commanders own all the risk. The functional commanders have all the authorities and the approvals. As the U.S. Forces Korea commander, the CFC commander, and the UNC commander, I have areas of operation, or I had areas of operation, areas of interest, and areas of influence. And what happens is people start to conflate the three. Any commander has to think about all three of those things. The authorities and the approvals that you're given by the commander-in-chief or the combatant commanders or the secretary define the area of operation, but that being a fool's errand to not wonder about the areas of interest and the areas of influence that can have an impact on my area of operation. And so defining the fights is extremely important going forward. The elements of national power right now, DIME, what we all learn in our institutions, are inadequate. What we did while I was in command, we added law enforcement, intelligence, technology, and commercial. Those are levers that we have as a nation to pull, to influence as we go forward. What starts locally goes regional and goes globally very quickly. We learned that with the global war on terrorism. We learned that with COVID, okay? And so the things that happen, you push on the balloon here, it expands in other locations. And so, we are a global power. We are all over the world every single day, and we need to be prepared to do that. And when it comes to coalition fighting, we never want a total eclipse of authorities and approvals. What we have to find with the Republic of Korea and our other allies, partners, and friends, it's a Venn diagram. And where it overlaps, where we can agree is where we have to focus. But make no mistake, we don't live in the region. And so, as I've been taught and learned time and time again, we're not moving the Republic of Korea. We're not moving the PRC. They're there. Japan, they're there. So they're their neighbors. We need to understand that, and we need to make sure that we're going through that. But the geographic commanders own all the risk, but they don't have all the authorities and the approvals that they need to go forward. The Joint Staff is not a general staff. Okay, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is not in the chain of command. The secretary, the commander-in-chief, down to the combatant commanders, and then down to the geographic commanders are the ones that are responsible going forward. But cyber is not just about cryptocurrency and what they're stealing. It's about a capability that our adversaries have that can impact our economy, for lack of a better term, as we go forward. So we got to think long term. We got to think cyber, artificial intelligence, Arctic. The Arctic is the melting. It'll save. Don't quote me on this. I've been told 20 days of sail time from the Western Pacific to the Atlantic. That's important. The United States of America is an Arctic country. PRC says they're a near Arctic country. That's friction between them and Russia. But they've had relationships. They've been partners, allies, since the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so we have to make sure we truly understand that when the United States gets involved, that other things have been there for a long period of time. So history is instructive, but not a blueprint. I think the axis of evil is a cartoonish comment. We have allies, partners, and friends. Our adversaries have allies, partners, and friends. What we don't talk about in this, in the allies, partners, and friends of the PRC, Russia, and whatnot, is the fact that India and the PRC have issues along the line of actual control. And yet, there's this thing called BRICS. What does all of that mean going forward? And so again, they have a Venn diagram, just like we have a Venn diagram. And where can we find areas that we can continue to work together on? The other piece we need to understand about when it comes to PRC and Russia and the DPRK is they have interior lines. When Putin visited Kim, he flew over his entire country and crossed one border. PRC one border. They have interior lines with Russia. DPRK, interior lines with PRC and Russia. We have exterior lines. The position on the Korean Peninsula, in my mind, is very, very important, not just to our security, but to the Republic of Korea going forward. Fighting from inside the A2AD bubble is going to be a lot cheaper in resources, lives, than it would be if we had to fight our way into it. And so having that presence, this is the game Go. It's not checkers and it's not chess. It's not even multidimensional chess. It is the game Go. It's about positions in the world, and we need to be there you can't commute. Extended deterrence, we have that capability because we can strike anywhere in the world with our capabilities going forward. And so we just need to make sure that we understand where history has gotten us, but we are at an inflection point in history, and I think the current construct is not good enough going forward. We haven't adapted to the new world that we currently sit in. Thanks.
Thanks. David.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to everyone. If you could put up the slides there, AV team. So, Go, Paduk for our Korean friends, or Wei Chi for China. I'm going to put a few stones on the board here for us. Since we talked about General Sharp in the past, he'll remember when we talked about a Northeast Asia Command in 1997. And at my age, at 67, I learned that I'm now allowed to remember things that never happened. And we never had a Northeast Asia Command. So here are the problems. Tyranny of distance, I think we all know that. But as we've said, the problem with Korea is the next war may not stay on the peninsula and may even not start on the peninsula. But we have the tyranny of distance, and we have these challenges. And if you look at all these challenges, Indo-PACOM is too big for one command, but the geography doesn't support really multiple commands. The traditional geography, the traditional battle space architecture that we place on it. But you look at third-party influence and intervention on the Korean Peninsula. You look at counter-nuclear operations on the peninsula. You look at conventional nuclear integration on the peninsula. All of these are issues that are Korea-focused that need to be dealt with in Korea. And of course, the combatant command authorities, while limited, as General Camera said, they reside in Hawaii, not on the Korean Peninsula. And while I want Korean combatant command authorities in Korea with the U.S., I think General Camera is right. We really need to go beyond those kind of authorities and integrate the interagency. And then, of course, alliance modernization. I really would like to talk about that. Next slide. All right, so what's the solution? I say a Northeast Asia Combatant Command in Seoul, inside the interior lines, as General Camera said. I would also put a high-level fusion cell, a Tokyo fusion node, really to synchronize and to deconflict activities that may take place throughout the theater. And it's really necessary to be able to do that in nearly the same time zone. The challenge we have are dual apportioned forces, primarily in Japan, that we're going to respond to multiple contingencies, and that's got to be addressed. Next slide. So, a Northeast Asia Command would do a number of things. One of the most important, though, is operationalize the nuclear consultative group. That planning headquarters or that planning group really can't operationalize anything, but a combatant command can. But what is really challenging that I started out with are the borders, and we have to think beyond conventional boundaries. And we should really focus on, as General Camera said, areas of influence and being able to operate and focus on overlapping areas of influence. And that's the challenge we have. Next slide. This is a wiring diagram to just really look at a combatant command and really raise the military committee, the senior U.S. military officer, and the chairman of the ROC JCS to a higher level and really think about a U.S. combatant command with ROC counterparts to really be a combined combatant command. Of course, CFC will fight the war. We should address OPCON transition. But what we really need is to focus on the nuclear problems, third-party influence and intervention, and to do things like General Camera created the Northeast Asia Fusion Cell, a brilliant concept, but it needs at least combatant command authorities to be able to operate throughout the area of influence and not just the area of operation or area of responsibility. Next slide. Now, I'll close with, this is the sticking point. It is boundaries, and we are very conventionally thinking here. We want lines on the map, but as everybody knows, those create gaps and seams. And I'm going to commit doctrinal heresy. You know, we have to be able to operate in shared battle space throughout the Asia Indo-Pacific. But rather than strict boundaries, we need to make our focus first on the shared areas of influence and be able to focus on that, particularly on a war fight in Korea, because the impact of China, Russia on a fight in Korea is, I mean, it's not like we've ever thought about it in the past. And it's getting worse, as General Sharp started out with, the coordination and collaboration and collusion of what some call the CRINC, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, or the Dark Quad, as Christopher Ford said. You know, that collusion is really creating problems for us. And on the Korean Peninsula, we need to be able to address the entire scope of the problem and not just the war fight in North Korea, which, of course, is critically important. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks. So I've got just a question I'll throw out to the whole panel, then we'll go to the audience. And what it really gets at is how do we, in a combined multinational effort, how can we work together to deter and be prepared to defend if necessary? And I ask you, we talk about it in a couple different constructs, and you can pick which one you want to talk about. First off is the combined nature under OPCON transition. There's very, very few people in Seoul or in Washington, D.C., for that matter, that truly understand what OPCON transition is. It's not Korea taking over the warfight. It's changing a commander, but keeping a combined nature. There are people talking about different constructs, but I believe, and I'm very glad that I saw the word combined in the statement last night. I hope that word was thought about and put in intentionally in the statement last night. Staying combined is very, very important. So that's one aspect. The other aspect then is regionally. There's many more trilateral exercises going on between South Korea, United States, and Japan. There's planning going on. I mean, there was nothing there when I was there, decades ago, over a decade ago going on, but there's much more of that going on now. How can that be expanded? And then the last one, and I've talked to David a little bit about this, is how do you, in this Northeast Asia Command perspective, think about how do you integrate the forces of South Korea, United States, and Japan? Because clearly Japan has capability, growing capability, both in deterrence and in strike capability. But we don't have a combined command relationship in Japan. Clearly, there's exercises, but thoughts of how, if that was formed, a Northeast Asia Command, how would you integrate the combined nature of U.S. South Korea and supporting, I'll call it supporting relationship of U.S. and Japan and just the coordination between the three of them. So again, a lot to unpack there, and you can pick how you want to handle that. But I would like to, talk about how do you think you, both from a deterrence and a capability to be able to defend, look at it from a inside a Korea perspective and a trilateral perspective than a command and control perspective. So maybe if you could talk about where you think OPCON, or up to you what you want to talk about in all of that.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you with that. With regard to combined nature of OPCON transition. That's why we maintain the one single command structure even after the OPCON. It's a kind of a change of position. However, we understand the nature of combinedness of the forces. So I think you don't have to worry that kind of a culture seriously. We understand, but some people in Korea wanted to accelerate the process, but the other are very prudent. But it is a decision of the government, and the government to government. I think at this time, the Trump administration and Lee Jae-myung administration agreed to accelerate the work. Like us, specialists, scholars, wanted to make detail to verify the stable transition, maintaining the kind of combinedness. That's important. The second one is I think the regional level of cooperation. Yet the Northeast Asia Command is too early for Korean, because we do not think about that details. Although we are actively participate in the multilateral training, which is held in our East Sea or the Philippine area or South China Sea, but we think at this level is in strengthening interconnectivity of U.S. hub and spoke alliance system, networking of RAG-US alliance, U.S.-Japan alliance, U.S.-Australian alliance, and then strengthening interconnectivity is our at this level of cooperation. But eventually, if there is a certain threat increased, and then there will be another momentum to integrate that kind of activity. But frankly speaking, at the level, it's premature.
Let me ask Marcus.
So I am very concerned about a misunderstanding about the CFC wartime OPCON that I know that you and General LeCamera are both very well familiar with. It's a little bit different than the concern that you have, and that is the lack of recognition of what wartime OPCON actually means, and how challenging it actually is for the CFC commander in a non-wartime situation to wield the authorities to have the same level of authority as responsibility, right? I mean, the CFC commander is responsible for the defense of the Republic of Korea, but until the wartime decisions are made and you're in a really extreme case, the CFC commander has to rely, as you both know, a lot on persuasion and rely, in the case of an American CFC commander in the USFK hat and the UN command hat, as much or more than CFC for deterrence purposes, right? But the CFC commander is at the forefront during theater exercises, right? And so I have been thinking about this problem for many years, and I've come to the conclusion that exercising and training in these scenarios short of war is so vital to being prepared for this possibility, because looking at what would happen on the Korean Peninsula, even if there was a U.S.-China war that got to the point where it was clearly a war and not just a military confrontation, say a limited thing and around a maritime dispute, then how difficult would it be for the CFC wartime structure to be activated until it was very clear that there was an actual attack taking place on the peninsula, right? And so I am concerned that the focus on wartime operational command and control obscures this gray zone situation that we could face. And so the challenge is we're never going to be able to have sort of the national level decisions, I don't think, to be able to have a truly combined operations under one commander in a situation short of full-scale war. But you can exercise and you can train, you can do tabletops, you can do field exercises. There are a range of things that we can do to explore scenarios short of that full-scale war that includes simultaneity. And I think that's the forcing function. And then it'd be great if we could then, through that, avoid having to activate our wartime command and control.
Paul?
Yeah. The way I looked at that piece was think of a relay race, and you're handed a baton, but you don't know where the runner is sometimes because you don't have complete access to everything that's going on. But yet you're going to be handed the baton to have to get it over the finish line. I think we have the opportunities now with our exercises, with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and things like that, to run through multiple scenarios. But we can't forget that the Republic of Korea, where it sits in the world, it also has allies, parts, friends, or it has people who are going to potentially come to their aid. I don't know what that is. That's an assumption that because they're out training and working in other areas, who else will come? So will it just be the, I think back to the United Nations Command and the nations that came to the aid of the Republic of Korea and the U.S. in 1950. What will that look like in the next fight? How do we incorporate that? And having been a coalition commander in multiple theaters, people come with national caveats. Okay, the U.S. had a national caveat. We're not going back to the Yalu, right? So we as the United States need to understand that we also operate with national caveats. People are going to want to provide that. How do we incorporate that going forward? Does it get incorporated as Combined Forces Command, or is it separate in a bilateral agreement? Because we know that the Republic of Korea also has bilateral relationships. So it's complicated. The Northeast Asia, a course of action. But I go back to my comments. I think the current construct, we've added on to the building. It's time to bring it down and to rethink this. That'll take time, but right now when you think of what's going on with this administration, it is clear that they're willing to think about things differently. It will take time, but I just think right now that we can't continue to Band-Aid this process going forward. And going forward, we have to think of ways to exercise this without people getting excited because militaries train. Readiness is perishable. We do different scenarios. It doesn't mean that's what we're going to do, okay? And so we have to kind of, take a breath and not get excited about different scenarios that may or may not happen.
A lot of great comments, and I really concur with them all. I would like to say that, what I'm focused on is moving from hub and spoke, that Bonchol said. Our last administration, Kurt Campbell called it a lattice work of alliances. I like to think of our friends, partners, and allies, our relationships, as a silk web, and really strengthening those relationships. And, although maybe Northeast Asia Command is an anachronism, is old think, I really want to break down the barriers, the traditional barriers of combatant commands. And that's why I think we should focus on what we need to influence and be able to do that. We need to lead with influence, supported by kinetic, and until we have to go kinetic, and then obviously we'll be leading with that. I also think 2 points I want to bring up just from the statement last night. I'm really concerned about. Everybody's talked about the importance of combined training, importance of the statement from the two presidents said they're going to go back to the Singapore summit and implement the Singapore summit. We all know what happened when that happened. We canceled exercises. We've got to press not to allow that to happen. General Camera is absolutely right. Training is perishable, but it's also key to deterrence. We've got to demonstrate our capability and our resolve that we will defend in a combined way. That I think that needs to be emphasized, that we will defend South Korea and we will defeat the North Korean People's Army. And so I fear that by going back to Singapore and in the security consultative statement, not saying that a use of nuclear weapons will bring an end to the regime. We're undermining deterrence, and we need to think hard about that as we move forward. And the last thing I'll say, General Cameron is right, our alliances and our adversaries have alliances. But why do they have alliances? Because of weakness, because of fear, because of desperation, and because of envy. They have inherently weak systems. They fear our alliances. They are desperate for support, particularly Russia and North Korea, but they envy our alliances. And we should remember that. That is one of the most important things. Our alliances work, and our alliances will work, and they will result in successfully defending our interest, ROC and U.S., and all of our friends, partners, and allies.
Great, thanks. We have time for just one or two questions from the audience here. Start over here. And please, just one question a person.
Korea Defense Veterans Association, New York City Metro Chapter. I'd like to talk about third-party influence intervention and the interagency. So twice a year, there's two big exercises in Korea, and The military rehearses actions on the objective. They train. How can we get the ROC government and the U.S. government to participate in the training so should things go kinetic, as Dave just talked about, we're better prepared and we built the relationships, the reconnaissance, the rehearsals to build that readiness in the fight tonight? I guess I'll start with General LaCamera, but anybody that wants to jump on that.
And one of the exercises the ROC government does participate. Would like to have more, yes. We role play a lot of the U.S. at the higher level going forward. So that is a course of action.
Yeah, my advice is to have tabletop exercises that focus on that issue set, because the problem is if you try and tack that on to theater warfighting exercises, there's this inherent intention of what are your objectives, what are you trying to do? But I think tabletop exercises, you can say, hey, this is focused on Paul Mill issues, and you can get participation from the civilian government and the ROK in the U.S. And frankly, maybe you don't even always need official participation. You can do it as a Track 1.5 and get the officials who just came out of government or appointees who are ready to come in, and that's how you can leverage the understanding. But I don't think trying to combine it with, in my experience, being in the middle of these exercises and presided over by General Sharp and several of them, that you can actually integrate them and focus on the Paul Mill issues that are going to be so important for third parties, because it'd just be it'd take you on too much of a tangent from the core warfighting training objectives.
I would recommend a return to Back to the Future. We used to conduct an exercise called Pyongyang Peace, which was
that's a great example.
High-level officials, former defense officials, government officials, and look at these kind of issues. And third-party intervention would be a great topic for a Pyongyang exercise. And of course, why do we do it? Because we want peace. We want to prevent war. But third-party intervention is critical, and I think something like that on an annual basis, probably around the time of the SCM and MCM, would be a good start.
The term of art, TPII, intervention is the kinetic or the physical, influence is the in the information space and whatnot. So we need to make sure that they're not the same.
And we have to deal with that influence piece, in armistice, in crisis, in conflict, and in war as well.
One more question time. Go ahead, sir. Wait.
I'm always eager to speak without a microphone. Marcus, you mentioned, if I heard you right, that when you do your tabletops or whatever you call them, you have a scenario where there's a limited nuclear attack. What does that look like, a limited nuclear attack?
Yeah, so actually it's funny that you asked, because I'm actually holding one of the reports from the exercise, the Guardian Tiger series.
You'll pay them later.
So it can look in many different ways, and but for example, in the Guardian Tiger one, there was a scenario where North Korea used a nuclear weapon at sea. There was another scenario where there was a tactical nuclear attack on an air base. And limited, it's hard to define, and we have a working definition of it, but it's designed to achieve some sort of limited military or operational effect using only a fraction of the capability that the adversary has available. And so in one of our other exercises, it was an underwater detonation that just sank a single ship, these sorts of things. And so these are the kind of things that can achieve some sort of tactical military effect, but that's not their main point. It's to show that the adversary is willing and able to use nuclear weapons, and it create a dilemma as to how we respond. And so to go back to Dave's point, if North Korea were to use a nuclear torpedo that sank a single ship, would the U.S. and ROK be willing to fight a nuclear war to end a North Korean regime, right? Those are the kind of dilemmas that North Korea can create with limited nuclear attacks. And it's the sort of thing I think we're taking more seriously. So that's an example.
So I see our time is up. I think we could go on for quite a bit longer here, but I want to thank the panel. And what I really draw out of all of this is the need to work together, United States, Republic of Korea, and Japan, in United Nations Command, all nations, not just from a military working together to be prepared for a war, but from the perspective of deterrence, and not just from a military perspective, but a whole of government perspective. To be able to pull all elements of power together to prepare, yes, for potential conflict, but as importantly, to try to deter that by not allowing us to get to that point. And that will take multinational, all of government to be able to do that. So thanks to the Korea Society and the Atlantic Council, and I guess this will conclude this session.
Thanks, General.